Beneath the glow of a dying star, Admiral Karzul lounged in the command throne of the alien dreadnought Tyrannes, gaze fixed on the shrinking blue curve of the latest human colony below. On the bridge around him, officers moved with the unhurried precision of predators convinced the prey had already surrendered. A planet was burning, and yet the Admiral felt only boredom. Shields dropped. Defense grid neutralized, murmured the weapons officer, not bothering to hide his yawning mandibles. The locals put up less resistance than the grain smugglers on Kefir. Karzul's lipless mouth curved in what passed for a smile. Humans always do. They scatter, they squeal, and then they burn. Efficient work, as always. His eyes drifted to the tactical hollow, where the enemy ships, laughable little tin craft with chemical thrusters, spun helplessly before Tyranni's guns. Another officer chuckled, voice rich with mockery. Do they even try, sir? One volley, and the whole defense fleet was scrap. At this rate, we'll wipe out every colony in the sector before the next rotation. The Admiral rose slowly, his armored carapace catching the firelight from the ravaged world below. He loved these moments, the silence after slaughter, the sweet stillness of victory. It felt like empire itself, inevitable and absolute. Set course for the next colony, he ordered lazily. Another nest to burn. Perhaps this one will scream louder. But the next colony didn't scream. The outpost drifted in cold orbit around a star barely clinging to life, its light sickly, dim. It was smaller than expected, with only a scattering of decaying structures on the barren moon below. The orbital station was silent, its metal hide scarred with centuries of dust storms and micrometeoroid impacts. No transmissions. No defenses powering up. Karzul's second-in-command tilted his head plates uneasily. Abandoned. Cowards fled before we arrived. Another officer sneered. They knew what was coming. Then the scanners lit up. Deep within the station's hull, something massive slept, a vessel unlike any the aliens had catalogued. It dwarfed even Tyrannes, its blackened metal hull webbed with scars, its shape angular and brutal, a relic from another age entirely. The science officer leaned forward, claws tapping nervously. Admiral, preliminary scans suggest it's human in design. Impossible, someone muttered. Humans barely reached their own moon before we found them. The officer zoomed in on the hull markings, lines of alien glyphs scorched by time but unmistakable in pattern. Design aged approximately 100,000 years. Silence swallowed the bridge. Even the hum of the dreadnought's engines seemed to fade. Karzul stared at the projection, feeling the faintest flicker of something he hadn't felt in decades, unease. Bring it aboard, he said finally, voice flat. I want to see this ghost up close. Boarding crews crossed the void and entered through a ragged breach in the derelict's hull. The corridors inside were dark, walls warped with age and heat, consoles shattered. But there were bodies, desiccated husks and armor that was both primitive and oddly sophisticated, a fusion of alloy and ceramic plates painted with faded insignias, an ancient human army entombed where it fell. One of the soldiers activated a console. It sputtered weakly to life. Symbols bloomed on the cracked screen, and with them, a pulse of energy rippled outward like a silent scream. Signal spike, the science officer reported sharply. Unknown frequency. It's broadcasting across half the sector. Karzul leaned forward. Broadcasting what? No one answered. Because far across the stars, on a planet the aliens thought broken and beaten, something ancient and patient had heard the call. Deep beneath Earth's crust, in a command center carved from black stone and reinforced steel, General Alejandro Vasquez read the incoming signal without expression. Around him, officers froze as translation software spat out the message carried on that alien frequency. Vault Theta breached. Protocol Ashfall active. Vasquez's voice was quiet, almost conversational. Bring the home fleet online. An aide hesitated. Sir, that will reveal our hand. Vasquez looked up slowly, his face carved from years of war and sleepless nights. They found the ship, he said simply. And when they find the ship, the war begins. You know this. Around him, the room stirred with controlled urgency. Orders moved through encrypted channels. Docks opened on the far side of the moon, silent ships slipping free like sharks from a dark reef. The humans did not shout, did not panic. They moved with the precision of people who had been preparing for this moment longer than their enemies could imagine. On Tyrannes, the boarding crew returned with fragments of data, logs from the ancient ship describing campaigns no alien historian had ever heard of. Wars fought not among stars, but across Earth's own surface. Footage flickered to life. Tanks grinding through ruined cities, soldiers in mud-smeared uniforms charging through gunfire, mushroom clouds boiling on the horizon. One of the officers watched, mandibles tightening. These are from before they reached space, before they united as a species. They killed each other like this for centuries. Another officer tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. Savages. No wonder they fell so easily to us. But no one echoed him this time. The admiral leaned closer to the screen, watching a battlefield filmed by human hands 1,000 centuries ago, artillery hammering trenches, skies on fire, men charging into machine gun fire without hesitation. And at the end of one recording, a single soldier looked up at the camera, his face streaked with blood and ash, and spoke words the translator rendered in cold, even tones. If the enemy thinks this war will break us, they've already lost. Aboard Tyrannes, no one spoke for a long time. Then the science officer reported, voice tight, "Admiral, new contacts emerging near the system's edge. Multiple fleets. Human design." Karzul straightened. Already? But we destroyed their colonies. The tactical screen lit up with signatures, warships, dozens at first, then hundreds, pouring from silent warp corridors like phantoms answering an ancient summons. They moved with discipline, with purpose. Not a ragged defense fleet. Not refugees. Soldiers. A single transmission cut through the void, calm and almost polite. "This territory is under Earth defense protocol. Withdraw immediately." On the alien bridge, no one laughed this time. Karzul stared at the growing armada, remembering the soldiers' words from centuries past. The wars fought before humanity had even reached the stars. Wars they had survived, rebuilt from, and learned from. Perhaps, he thought slowly, they had made a mistake. The human fleet advanced in perfect silence. The alien council chamber glowed with the shifting blues of the star beyond its windows, a halo of light framing the furious debate within. Around the circular dais, representatives of the Empire's great houses clashed like blades, their voices echoing against walls built to intimidate lesser species. Admiral Karzul stood in the center, his armor scorched from recent campaigns, his eyes burning with a restrained anger he could no longer mask. "They appeared out of nothing," he said, each word clipped, deliberate. "Not scavengers. Not raiders. A fleet, organized, silent, and fast. They are not the primitives you told us they were." One counselor hissed through sharpened teeth. "You exaggerate, Admiral. Their colonies fell like sandcastles before the tide. One derelict relic does not transform them into a threat to the Empire." Karzul's mandibles tightened. He remembered the calm voice across the comms, offering withdrawal as though they, not the Empire, commanded the stars. He remembered the soldier in the ancient footage, staring through time itself with the certainty of a species that had buried too many enemies to count. "Watch this," he said flatly. At his signal, the chamber's center filled with light. Holographic images unspooled, grainy footage extracted from the derelict ship. Human wars unfolded in brutal silence, lines of soldiers vanishing into artillery fire, cities turned to ash beneath mushroom clouds, armored vehicles grinding over cratered earth while sirens wailed in languages long extinct. The images shifted, starships this time, human-built, trading plasma fire above Martian colonies during the Titan insurgency 2 centuries ago. Tactical logs showed kill counts, casualty reports, weapon specifications. Humans recorded everything, even their own destruction. The counselors leaned forward despite themselves. "They fight each other like this," Karzul said softly. "Century after century. world after world. And somehow they survive.
They grow.
They adapt. They are still outmatched. Another counselor snapped, but the edge in his voice betrayed unease. An insect may bite the hand before it is crushed. Karzul turned his gaze on him. Insects do not build fleets that disable a dreadnought's engines without firing a shot. The words struck like a blade. Murmurs rippled around the chamber. The counselors had all seen the report. Tyrannies, pride of the Imperial fleet, rendered helpless by a single human transmission seconds before the Earth fleet emerged from the void. And the humans had not fired. They had simply waited. Karzul replayed the final moment before his retreat. The human commander's image had appeared on his bridge, a woman with iron-gray hair, her uniform unadorned except for a single silver insignia at the collar. Her expression had been calm, almost courteous, as though ordering the surrender of an empire required no more emotion than asking someone to pass a drink across a table.
"Withdraw," she had said.
Further hostility will be met with measured response. We recommend against testing our measurements. Measured response. Not vengeance. Not fury. Precision. Karzul had faced warlords, zealots, even machines that calculated genocide to the decimal point. None had frightened him. But this calm, this refusal to posture or threaten, it felt like standing on the edge of a gravity well, realizing too late that escape was impossible. One of the younger counselors tried again, clinging to arrogance like a shield. So they have fleets. We have an empire stretching 100 systems. We will bring the weight of it down on them until nothing remains but dust. Will we? Karzul asked quietly. The chamber stilled. He played the final sequence of footage taken from the derelict vault, maps of human expansion since first contact with the Empire. The counselors stared as red markers bloomed across the galaxy, shipyards hidden in nebulae, supply lines coiled like snares around imperial sectors, research stations buried under dead moons the Empire had ignored as worthless. These are not colonies, Karzul said. They are fortresses disguised as settlements. Every raid we launched hit exactly what they allowed us to hit. For the first time, fear cracked the council's composure. You're suggesting, one murmured slowly, that the humans wanted us to find that derelict. Karzul let the thought hang in the charged air. He remembered the human general's eyes, cold and steady across the comms. Not defiant, not pleading, simply waiting, as though every move had been anticipated long before the Empire made it. They knew we would come, he said. And they were ready. Silence followed, broken only by the low hum of the chamber's energy shields. Outside the windows, the star flared briefly, light washing over the counselors like judgment. Finally, the High Minister of War spoke, voice strained. What do you propose, Admiral? Karzul looked at the maps again, the red markers spreading like veins through imperial space. He felt the weight of every battle he had fought for the Empire, every victory that now seemed like a trap closing slowly around them. First, he said, we stop underestimating them. Or, we will not stop them at all. But even as he spoke, reports were arriving from the outer sectors. Human fleets moving with surgical precision, cutting supply lines, disabling communications relays, seizing shipyards before the Empire even realized they were under attack. Not with overwhelming numbers. With strategy. With preparation centuries in the making. Karzul watched the counselors absorb the news, their arrogance bleeding out like air from a ruptured hull. Some shouted for counterattacks, others for negotiation. Old rivalries flared as fear eroded the Empire's carefully maintained unity. Through it all, Karzul stood silent, because he had begun to understand what the others had not. This was no longer a war the Empire could win by force alone. Something deeper was unfolding, something the humans had been shaping since the first colony fell, and perhaps long before that. As the council dissolved into chaos, Karzul replayed the human commander's message one last time. Withdraw. Not a threat. A promise. And for the first time in his career, Admiral Karzul wondered if he was already on the wrong side of history. Stars folded open like pages in a silent book as the human fleets advanced. They did not roar or boast or fill the void with threats. They simply moved, cold and precise, as though guided by a single mind. Admiral Karzul watched the tactical displays aboard Tyrannes, his mandibles locked tight as reports streamed in from every corner of the Empire. Shipyards gone dark. Outposts seized before alarms even triggered. Trade convoys vanishing as though swallowed by the void itself. The Empire's response was chaos. Fleets scrambled piecemeal, admirals shouted over one another on fractured channels, and in council chambers across the core worlds, politicians argued over whether this was rebellion or invasion. But Karzul knew. He had seen the patterns. This was not fury. It was mathematics given shape. He studied one recording from the frontier, a human strike group emerging from a wormhole within a breath's distance of an Imperial communications hub. No hails. No demands. Just silent boarding craft latching onto the station's hull. Minutes later, the hub systems went offline. Not destroyed, repurposed. The humans used the Empire's own network to spread disinformation, turning loyal garrisons against one another before vanishing back into slip space. They weren't conquering planets. Not yet. They were cutting nerves one by one until the Empire could no longer feel its own limbs. Karzul's second-in-command approached, voice low. "We've intercepted fragments of human transmissions. They reference something called Protocol Ashfall. No translation beyond that." The Admiral nodded slowly. He had heard the phrase once before, from the human commander who had ordered his withdrawal with the calm of a surgeon prepping for incision. Whatever Ashfall was, it had been waiting centuries to fall. "Summon the fleet leaders," Karzul ordered. "We meet within the hour." The War Council aboard Tyrannes was nothing like the Empire's grand political chambers. No gilded walls, no towering windows overlooking stars. Just a cold room of alloy and holographic maps, its air tense with static and fear. Admirals and generals argued over tactics, some demanding a counterstrike on Earth itself, others urging retreat to protect the core systems. Every plan collapsed under the same reality. They had no idea where the human fleets would appear next. Karzul silenced them with a single gesture. "You fight as though this enemy thinks like us," he said. "They do not." One general sneered. "War is war. They bleed. They break. They adapt." Karzul cut in sharply. "Show me one campaign in their history where they stopped when cornered. One enemy who outlasted them. You will not find it." He activated the central holomap. Red markers bloomed where Imperial losses had mounted in just the past 48 hours. Whole sectors flickered uncertainly, communications cut, local governors begging for reinforcements that would never arrive because transit lanes had been severed like tendons. "They are dismantling us," Karzul said, voice even. "Piece by piece. Not to conquer territory. To remove our ability to fight at all." The younger officers shifted uneasily. Some still clung to pride, to the memory of colonies burned in the opening days when the Empire seemed invincible. But the older veterans studied the map in silence. They recognized the efficiency of a predator that wasted no motion. Karzul let them see it, let them feel the inevitability tightening like a noose. Only then did he speak again. "We must open negotiations." The room erupted. Shouts of treachery, of surrender, of cowardice filled the air. Karzul stood unmoving until the noise died under the weight of his stare. "You think they want our throne?" he asked softly. "Our worlds? Our riches?"
No.
"They want the war to end on their terms. And if you mistake that restraint for weakness, you will not live to regret it." Silence followed. Finally, one of the younger admirals muttered, "And if they refuse to negotiate?" Karzul looked at the map again. More red markers every minute. Ashfall spreading. "Then we will learn," he said, "what it feels like to be prey." Hours later, as Tyrannes prowled the void near the Empire's frontier, a single transmission cut through the fleet's encrypted channels. The same calm human voice, unhurried, almost courteous. "Admiral Karzul, we are prepared to speak. Coordinates attached. Come alone." He studied the message for a long time, mandibles tight. It was not a request, nor quite a threat, merely an expectation, delivered by a power certain of its position. His officers protested, but Karzul silenced them with a gesture. He remembered the footage from the derelict vault, the soldier's voice from 1,000 centuries past. If the enemy thinks this war will break us, they've already lost. Perhaps, he thought grimly, this was the only way to learn what humanity truly wanted. His shuttle departed Tyrannies under silent escort, bound for the coordinates transmitted by the enemy. The human vessel waiting there was nothing like Imperial warships. No ornamentation, no banners, no displays of power. Just black hull plating that seemed to drink in the starlight, weapons retracted, engines idle. A single figure awaited him aboard the command deck, a woman with iron-gray hair and eyes like glacial stone. The same commander from before. "Admiral," she said in perfect Imperial standard, as though she had spoken it all her life. "We can end this before it consumes your people entirely." Karzul studied her, this human who carried herself not as a conqueror, but as someone who had already counted the cost of victory and found it tiresome. "What is it you want?" he asked finally. Her answer was simple. "An end," she said. "On our terms. Or there will be nothing left to end." The words hung in the air between them, heavy as the silence of the waiting fleets. Admiral Karzul returned to Tyrannies in silence, carrying words heavier than any weapon he had ever commanded. The human commander had offered no ultimatums, no grand speeches. She had simply explained what would come if the Empire refused. Precise descriptions of each fleet movement already underway. Sectors isolated, trade collapsed, military logistics bleeding out through 100 invisible cuts. The tone had been almost weary, as though humanity had hoped, perhaps even wished, for some choice other than victory. But choice was no longer the Empire's to make. The first report struck like hammer blows before Karzul had even reached the bridge. Entire battle groups gone dark. Orbital shipyards surrendered without firing a shot, their crews disoriented by sabotage no one had detected until it was too late. Civilian governors screamed for Imperial protection while human fleets bypassed them entirely, dismantling weapon platforms and communications arrays with clinical precision.
It was not conquest.
It was disassembly. By the time Tyrannies entered orbit over the Empire's central world, panic had replaced arrogance in the council chambers. The High Minister of War demanded counterstrikes that no longer existed to launch. The finance guilds warned of economic collapse as trade networks fractured. Border colonies threatened rebellion if Imperial fleets abandoned them to human raids. Karzul entered the chamber, like a shadow cast across their desperation. "You will surrender," he said before any of them could speak. The High Minister turned on him, spittle flying. "You dare." "I dare because you have no fleets left to command," Karzul snarled, slamming data across the central display. Red markers covered the map now, entire sectors blinking with human control or silence where Imperial forces had once stood. "You thought them primitives. You burned their colonies, mocked their defenses. Now they have gutted your empire without ever trying to hold it." One counselor whispered, "Why haven't they taken the core worlds?" Karzul remembered the human commander's eyes, cool, almost pitying. "Because they don't want them," he said softly. "They want the war to end. They want us to understand." Another minister spat the word like poison. "Understand what?" The admiral looked at the map again, at the spreading absence where an empire had once ruled, and felt the weight of centuries pressing down on his carapace. That we were never the predators. Even as the council erupted, the final phase began. The human fleets arrived not with the chaos of battle, but with the inevitability of gravity itself. Wormholes bloomed across the skies of the Empire's capital world, black petals opening against starlight, and through them came ships in formations so precise it felt like mathematics had taken physical shape. Defense grids armed automatically, but before any could fire, entire targeting networks shut down, overridden by signals the Empire still didn't understand. Human forces descended without a single wasted shot. Orbital weapons deactivated. Fleet command relays went dark. Entire legions found their exocets, and vehicles immobilized by viruses slipped silently into Imperial systems days ago. And still, no orbital bombardments came. No mass slaughter. On the surface below, Karzul watched from the council tower as human troops moved through the streets with unhurried confidence, securing military districts and power stations while civilians stood frozen in doorways, expecting fire and death that never came. The High Minister of War collapsed into his chair, trembling. "It's over," he whispered. Karzul felt the truth settle over him like dust on a tomb. The Empire had built fleets, armies, fortresses across 100 systems, believing strength alone made them eternal. Yet here, at the end, humanity had not crushed them with brute force. They had sliced the Empire apart like a surgeon removing a tumor, each cut deliberate, each move planned long before the first colony burned. And now the surgeon waited for the patient to choose: live under new rules, or bleed out trying to defy them. The human commander arrived at the council tower as the sun dipped low over the imperial capital. She entered without guards, helmet tucked beneath one arm, her uniform as plain as her expression. The minister shrank from her as though she carried plague, but Karzul stepped forward to meet her. "Admiral," she said simply. He searched her face for triumph, for cruelty, for anything that might explain why humanity had brought an empire to its knees yet left its cities standing. He found only exhaustion, and something colder beneath it, resolve like bedrock. "You've won," Karzul said. "We ended it," she corrected. "There was never anything to win." The council demanded terms, but she offered none beyond surrender. Imperial fleets would disarm. Border systems would fall under joint administration until human security protocols were established. The Empire's rulers would remain in place under supervision, governors rather than sovereigns, so long as they kept the peace. "And if we refuse?" the High Minister spat. The human commander looked at him the way one might study a dying animal too stubborn to stop struggling. "Then Protocol Ashfall continues," she said. No one asked what that meant. They had already seen it unfold. When the surrender came, it came everywhere at once. Fleet admirals ordering compliance, garrisons powering down weapons, entire worlds transmitting silence where defiance had once lived. Humanity did not celebrate. No banners rose over conquered palaces, no victory parades filled the streets. They simply moved on to the work of dismantling what remained of the Empire's war machine with the same cold precision they had shown from the beginning. Karzul stood beside the human commander on the council tower's balcony as night fell across the capital. Fires burned in the distance where panicked loyalists had rioted, but already human drones moved through the streets, restoring power, delivering medical aid, imposing order without cruelty or hesitation. "You could have destroyed us," Karzul said at last. "Yes," she answered. "Why didn't you?" She looked out over the city lights, expression unreadable. "Because extinction isn't victory. And because someone, someday, will come for us the way you came. When they do, humanity will need allies who understand what it means to survive." Karzul studied her profile, the calm weight of her words settling like stone. Perhaps this was what true power looked like, not conquest, but preparation for a war even greater than this one. Far above, human fleets were already reorienting toward deep space, engines burning for stars beyond imperial maps. Whatever they had awoken with that ancient signal, Karzul realized it hadn't ended here. This had only been humanity clearing its borders before turning outward toward threats neither Empire nor Council yet understood. And as the first human banners flickered to life on the Empire's central command spire, not flags of victory, but signals of occupation and order, Admiral Karzul understood the chilling truth beneath her restraint. Humanity had not merely survived conquest. They had been waiting for it,